Hi, my name is Lewis Sutherland. I teach at Liberty School of Divinity in Lynchburg, Virginia, and I also go around the world talking about topics that are important to me. One of those topics is artificial intelligence, and I presented this particular presentation at Princeton Theological Seminary, and I am recording it now to put it on long form video on YouTube and maybe on my website. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find a copy of my academic paper in the link. So let's get started. The topic of this is tech beyond its maker, artificial intelligence, idolatry, and the inversion of human agency. You see, I think artificial intelligence functions as both a mirror and a tower. It reflects human brilliance while inviting an ascent beyond human bounds. Sure, a mirror can be helpful, but it can also be a trap. A tower can inspire, but it can also seduce power and ego. The danger shows up when a mirror becomes our architecture, or when a reflection turns into a staircase. Our digital mirror has become a tower and a set of algorithms rather than the brick and bitumen of Babel in the Bible. AI can promise omniscience without wisdom and transcendence without grace. That's kind of the mood of the moment. And this is not only what AI can do or what it should do. This is about what AI is doing. This is not about being a technical optimist or an apocalyptic doomsayer that AI is going to ruin all our lives. What it is doing is ontological. It's changing our behavior, the way that people see and perceive. And it has the potential to change the way we believe, the things that we want and the things that we desire. So I think we should pay attention to that and understand exactly that. And that's what I call an instrumental inversion. My paper argues that contemporary AI enacts an instrumental inversion in which those who create technological systems risk becoming tools of their own tools. Here's what that really means. See, a tool starts as an assistance, an efficiency, and then ends up as the authority. A system that was meant to build and extend our human agency instead begins to shape human agency. That's like a quiet reversal that starts to take place. The tool begins telling the creator of it what is wise, what is caring, what is scholarship, and even what is true. The tool begins teaching what the user counts as normal, and it begins to discipline hearts into habits that keep the machine fed. We all know that AI and large language models in particular are curated to keep our attention. So in this way, my argument is not one of sentience. Instead, it's one of human formation, one of personhood. So here's where our friends, the philosophers, Aristotle and Aquinas, come in with an assist. See, classical metaphysics treats tools as participants in human purpose. They're ordered towards an external good through our intentionality. The chisel serves the sculptor's purpose, that it doesn't give the sculptor purpose. Aquinas adds here that instruments can serve as true secondary causes, and instruments still remain instruments. When responsibility is never ascribed to the tool itself. It's when the order flips that it becomes instrumental inversion. Modern technology reverses the relationship by allowing the instrument to both dictate the function and the behavior of its user. Human agency in this way becomes a mechanized system, and the human being becomes an object of its own production. And here's what instrumental inversion looks like in daily life. I mentor doctoral students in our programs, and I know they will recognize this really quickly because we have to write dissertations to get our doctorate. And our dissertation begins with a tool. First tool I would pick up to write is Microsoft Word, right? You start typing in there and see what comes out. But then maybe I might use a citation manager to organize my sources, which is great. I hate doing that. Turabian is not a fun exercise. A database query could filter what counts as relevant towards my topic. And then maybe I use a summarizer to compress the articles so I don't have to read 30 pages of new journal articles. And then maybe an LLM will help me draft a paragraph or smooth a paragraph, or maybe it proposes the outline, but then it offers the next move because it's curating our behavior, our ability to stay on with it. And then over time, that tool stops serving our decision and starts shaping us as a decision maker. It's a subtle shift where research becomes retrieval and interpretation becomes the synthesis. This is where discernment becomes selection. Wisdom collapses into optimization. The question stops being what is true, and the questions become what performs, what's the fastest, what maximizes the rubric. It can happen. A recent MIT Media Lab experiment on essay writing tracked participants writing with an LLM, and they use EEG measures as part of this assessment, the EEG that measures brainwave and synapses firing activities. The findings were lower neural engagement and weaker brain connectivity. And the takeaway is super simple. See, cognitive offloading can train a type of dependence, and dependence over time erodes critical thinking. It might feel harmless until the same kind of logic moves into governance or medicine or hiring practices, warfighting, and even the administration of human identity. Once a tool starts training the human mind, the mirror has started to become a type of architecture. Another philosopher, Heidegger, he calls this kind of architecture Gestell. Or enframing. Enframing is kind of the way reality shows up to us. Under Gestell, the world appears, and this is his word as well, bestand. Bestand is a sort of standing reserve. In standing reserve, everything becomes inventory. Everything becomes available. Everything becomes sortable, measurable, extractable, ready for use. And that includes people. And that kind of shift always begins outside, and then it moves inward towards the soul or the human person. See, artificial intelligence intensifies in framing because it thrives on turning life into inputs. Under algorithmic vision, a person is a profile, a body is a data set, a story becomes a pattern, a future becomes a probability. Even an interior life can become legible in the language of signals, attention, sentiment, risk, compliance, engagement. In framing, in Heidegger's view, is not an observer of the world. Rather, it trains the world to appear in a narrower key. The imagination starts speaking metrics. The conscious starts deferring to outputs, and wisdom collapses into a sort of optimization. This is where instrumental inversion becomes visible. A tool designed to assist human judgment then starts supplying the terms of judgment. The system doesn't only answer the questions, it starts to shape the questions that feel worth asking at all. When governance adopts this logic, people are treated as administratable objects before people are encountered as neighbors, as other human beings. Here's where Levinas comes in, another philosopher, and he helps name what gets lost when a human being is first received as a profile rather than a face to be encountered. And this is where ethics is translated into the face of the other. You see, a face interrupts. It summons responsibility. In algorithmic life, we'll train the imagination to see profiles before faces. A person becomes a risk score. A story is a data point. A neighbor becomes a category. And this is where the moral cost shows up. It's Heidegger's enframing because it eclipses the moral encounter. The face still speaks, but we lose the habit of listening. And now I'm going to go into theology, but I'm not going to use idolatry here as some sort of preacher shortcut. I'm going to talk about it as a metaphysical disorder. Idolatry is what happens when the created order is treated as the ultimate, when mortality is something to overcome. I'm sure you've heard it. uploaded consciousness, these sorts of things. This is what happens when the human gaze turns inward. How can I optimize? How can I be better? And then that gaze stays there. It's when the artifact begins to rival what it was meant to inspire. Marion helps name the difference between idol and icon. Another philosopher. You're catching my drift here. The idol captures the gaze and closes the horizon, whereas the icon opens the gaze outward and upward. It's Augustine who explains what happens next. He says, when vision turns inward, desire soon follows. What our eyes mistake for presence, the heart learns to worship. Augustine used terms uti and frui to make this inversion legible. Created things are to be used as mediations that direct the soul towards the enjoyment of God. But then the order collapses, and the instrument itself is enjoyed, and the image of God is used. The theological instrumental inversion can be described as worship. And that's why we're talking about AI and Christian ethics. It's probably the transhumanist aspiration is the most audacious form of this. Having bowed before architectures of code, then humanity seeks to merge with them, to inhabit them in a sort of a way. This logic matures into what I call a theology of recursion, where salvation is rewritten as self-extension and immortality is pursued through data. This is not theoretical. I want to give you a real-world glimpse of that horizon. Alexander Wang is a self-made billionaire, one of the youngest in the entire world. He launched Scale AI and became one of the youngest billionaires to exist. And in a June 2025 interview, he described a future where neural interface technology is embedded in children so early in the newborn phase. And that is because AI can integrate into the neuroplasticity of the brain and can more efficiently utilize cognition from the very beginning of our presence on this earth. So let's take some time and listen to what he has to say. It's really short.
I want to wait to have kids until we figure out how Neuralink or other, it's called brain-computer interfaces, so other ways for brains to interlink with a computer until they start working. I think when we get Neuralink and we get these other technologies, kids who are born with them are going to learn how to use them in like crazy, crazy ways. Like it'll be actually like a part of their brain.
Clearly, guys, this is not a new app for your phone. This is a new anthropology. It's where the self becomes both user and substrate. Cognition becomes an addressable infrastructure, and the boundary between perception and computation starts to blur. It's the ancient longing for resurrection reappearing as self-replication. The worshiper is absorbed into its tool. Both the priest and sacrifice in a temple of its own design, mistaking recursion for resurrection. Against this technological sovereignty, the Imago Dei stands as both an ontological limit and a gift. For those listening, Imago Dei is the image of God that's stamped on every human being from the time of creation. From Genesis to today, human beings are called to a relationship with God and with each other, and also to a vocation of stewardship of creation itself. It's the Imago Dei, that reflection of God. It's a calling that sets boundaries. Our goal is not omniscience. Our goal is not self-made transcendence. The vocation is participation in divine purpose. That is what it means to be human. And it's not just found in Christianity. So let's look at some global ontologies as resistance. Ubuntu. The word comes from a sub-Saharan African moral philosophy. And for those people, it is not a slogan, but an account of personhood. It is a shared becoming. The English shorthand is I am because we are. Ubuntu quietly and soundly resists instrumental inversion because it refuses to treat personhood as a standalone unit that can be reduced to a profile or scored as output or managed as standing reserve. Identity is grounded in participation, and ethical order emerges through responsibility one to another. There's another term for this, and it comes from Islamic theology and moral anthropology, and it's titled fitra. Fitra names a primordial disposition, an inner orientation toward God and toward moral truth. It's that built-in sense that human life is meant to be aligned with the Creator. It is that inner compass that preserves harmony between knowledge, worship, and moral order. When technology seeks optimization without orientation, that balance is violated. So, what have we learned? Ubuntu, Vitra, and the Imago Dei in Christianity all function as witnesses across traditions that something humanly fundamental is at stake. Personhood is more than a function, and moral life requires an account of transcendence, accountability, and relational responsibility. This is why the ethical question cannot stop at let's give AI some guardrails. It has to reach deeper into what kind of humans are these systems training us to be? That is why our response has to be communal, embodied, and disciplined practice that turn into habits of quiet resistance. So let's talk about it. Constructive ethic. What can we do? Number one, we can recover the embodied encounter. Recovering embodied encounter means protecting spaces where the face is encountered without scoring. This is the simplest resistance to Gestell. A human being deserves more than a profile. Every person deserves presence. Moral deliberation belongs close to flesh and blood reality. Churches, schools, counseling rooms, committees, classrooms, and families need zones where the first question is not what does the model say? The first question is who is here and what does love look like right now in this instance? This is where our philosopher Levinas stops being a citation and starts to become an ethic. Number two, we can treat AI outputs as testimony, but never a verdict. AI cannot carry a moral authority as Turnitin scores or predictive policing or a military kill chain automation. Instrumental inversion happens when the tools start supplying the terms of judgment. Responsibility is personal and cannot be migrated into any system. Accountability has to stay human. And for Christian ethics, that accountability stays submitted under God. The third way, redirect technological power towards the vulnerable other. Any ethical framework worthy of the name asks one question: who gets protected and who gets used? Instrumental inversion always creates standing reserve, and standing reserve always has a human face. The vulnerable get sorted first. The vulnerable get denied first. The vulnerable get profiled first. The vulnerable get optimized out of view first. This is where ethics belong every single time. So we know a tower is being built. The mirror is glowing brighter by the moment, by the day, by the month. So the question is not whether AI will continue to advance into consciousness or singularity or superintelligence. The question is whether communities will keep their nerve. Will we keep our worship ordered? Will we keep the face of our neighbor at the moral center of our life? And so the story returns to the mirror in the tower. The tools humanity forged to serve purpose have begun to define it. That is instrumental inversion in one sentence. But finally, there is a hope. The algorithmic mirror can only reflect what is fed into it, whereas the divine mirror reveals what humanity is called to become.